you're based in LA, and there's an awful lot that's happening right now. And I think you were mentioning that it's been kind of uh, painful, disruptive, things like that. I was just wondering what your experience is like being someone that is trained in mindfulness practices, is very involved within mindfulness communities and facilitating a lot of that training and everything like that. How is this kind of manifesting for you, all the things that are happening in LA?
Yeah, it's interesting. So practically, there's no issue. Like I'm safe. I'm far away from where there was unrest. What I really noticed is that there's almost a kind of like psychic impact that just to know that there's uh, possibility of escalation, conditions that are being put into place that might lead to escalation or violence or unfortunate things. And one of the ways I think about meditation practice or Dharma practice is um, developing the wisdom to know where to rest the heart. So this is like just on a practical level, very challenging in a world where there's a lot of stuff happening globally. Most of us have kind of busy lives, so we have competing and many things competing for our attention. The age of technology has kind of put that on steroids. So, you know, emails and texts and chats and all kinds of things competing for your attention. And to some degree, meditation is an intentional training. And but how do we know what is most worthy of our attention? Our attention is a kind of a form of care, a form of love. What is it? Where do we want to rest the heart in this moment? What's most wise? What's most skillful? What leads to my own benefit and the benefit of others? And then so we develop that wisdom, as we go through life, through our meditation practice, also like feedback loops, noticing what happens when we doom scroll, how that affects the heart mind, how that affects the body. Um, but then there's also the second part of practice is developing the meditative ability to actually do that. So you've decided like it's most wise to rest my attention here, and that I can actually maintain the attention in that place. So this is how I sort of am approaching what's happening in LA and what's happening globally, nationally, and even personally. Is like really trying to be wise about where I give my attention, and when things are particularly stressful, it seems like the resource of attention it's gets more fragmented or weakens in some way. So um, it's another thing to consider. So one of the things that I've been doing with a little bit of a news junkie, it's kind of my vice. I've like to keep informed on things and podcasts, and I read a couple of papers pretty much cover to cover every day online, and starting to reach the limit of what can actually be metabolized in a day, a week, a month. So a lot of my way of coping with things has been to make sure I have time for a kind of retreat. And even if it's just 45 minutes of meditation, that it's actually an intentional process of withdrawing myself from engagement in the world just for that period of time, just to allow the dust to settle, um, the glitter and the snow globe that has been, constantly in activation will only really settle if you have those conditions of quiet and stillness, turning the mind inward. So I found that actually to be a great refuge. And then because I'm not a monastic or I don't live in a world where I do that all the time, when I'm in a mode of engagement, I feel like I have more energy, more enthusiasm, uh, less ill will, and more hopefully more compassion and kindness and whatever I'm trying to do in the world.
I think that's a wonderful approach, and just like because you are engaged in the world, you are someone that is not consistently on retreat. You're not monastic. You are kind of like a part of
Yeah.
the world. And I was wondering, I guess, how to understand this. Where yeah, I think it's a beautiful metaphor of that glittery snow that kind of if a snow globe has to kind of come to a settle and then things look clearer. And I was wondering when you do that, when you have a regular practice of sitting or meditating, however you meditate, and you find that your snow globe has come to a resting point, a settled point, and then you go out and you have these kind of more reserves of energy, you have more energy. Is that stillness kind of still with you when you're out and engaging with people, or do you feel like your snow globe is always kind of shook up, or is there kind of like an always like a perennial like stillness that happens there too?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little boat. I mean, the stillness carries forward for sure. And even though things may be turbulent, there's some sense of stability in it. When I'm solid on my practice, or when I come back from a extended retreat, there's a feeling of like more stability within the storm. Um, but then also, I think it's just, it's something you have to keep doing, because the impingements of the world do agitate us. Um, and what I've come to see is that in some ways, it's not a problem. In some ways, we get agitated or worried or scared or concerned because we care, you know, and even like things that are happening right now. I'm not an immigrant, not directly affected by this, but we human beings, we have hearts that resonate. So we see the suffering of others, and it naturally impacts us. And um, so the other thing that I've been working on probably for about a decade is to befriend that feeling. I call it dread. It's sort of like the feeling of dread. What's going to happen. Uh, to kind of befriend that, and to see that it's not a defect. It's actually a feature of what it means to be a human with a heart that cares. And the alternative of being so inwardly focused or so like disconnected from the world is actually in some ways more painful, isolating.
Yeah. And on that note of kind of befriending these maybe in a conventional sense little less than ideal qualities of a person, whether it's like the anger or anxiety or dread or things like that. These are like more or less considered uh the hard ones.
Yeah,
And I haven't gone through all of them. Just grief and uh and I know that we live in a world that's a little bit more open to this idea of in a conventional sense, a human sense, with building physical relationships with other people or just in proximity. And there's more of an openness these days to having less. If you identify someone as toxic or as someone that is problematic in your life, you kind of keep them beyond arm's reach or maybe in arm's reach, and you kind of understand where they have to
yeah,
be in their life and keep them from being closer to your center.
yeah,
And that's for your own mental health. That's for your own sense of safety and all of that. And then also too, I mean, and I've heard this before, and I think it's a wonderful thing, this ability to befriend these more difficult emotions, befriend these
yeah,
and keep these other elements of yourself that could appear as toxic, could appear as less than ideal.
yeah.
Uh, how would you encourage somebody to go about opening themselves up to getting close to that feeling of
Yeah.
dread or anger, things like that?
Well, one thing is that having good friends is so important. And the Buddha spoke often about keeping good company, being around spiritual friends, being around people. Largely I'm surrounded by people who are on a path of practice, by choice, and also it's where I hang out. And it's profoundly beneficial because you see people that are, we all have our struggles, but at least we're facing in the same direction, or we have some aspiration that it's possible to be equanimous and kind and generous, and actually possible to work to cultivate these qualities of heart. It's not something that we have to be born with. We can actually develop it. So that I don't think you can really overstate how important that is, and and not being around people who are toxic in a way that you can't metabolize. Sometimes we have people that we have to be close to, or we choose to be close to, and they're difficult people. Um, so we do our best, and also make time away from those energies as best we can. I'm thinking about like family members that you know I'm very fortunate I don't have many of those people in my life. But um, the other thing I would say is that before I actually get to your question is that I make a little bit of a distinction between well, for me, ill will or anger is a kind of special category of things. um, some of it is temperament, like I'm very like quick to anger just temperamentally. And one of the things I've seen in meditation practice is that there is a kind of toxicity, to use your word, to that. And in fact, the Buddha likened anger to a kind of sickness. It's semi-seductive because you get an adrenaline rush, you get a feeling of empowerment. Maybe there's a feeling, at least I'm doing something, I'm pounding my fists on the table. But ultimately, it doesn't lead anywhere helpful. So, and that's not to like be hard on myself when I'm angry, but to allow space for that energy to settle. So I might be temporarily befriending it when it's there, um, but I'm not befriending it in the way that I'm welcoming it, the way I might be welcoming the signals that tells me that my heart is aching for something. Slight distinction. Feels a little bit more wholesome to really. With dread, the call is to shift to compassionate heart, because dread has there's two parts of it. One is the bad thing that's happening, or the bad thing that I'm worried about happening, and the other part of it is that my wish that it not happen, my wish for the well-being of those involved. And it's a very subtle distinction, but when I can rest my heart with the love that's in it, it becomes less of a problem. Even though it might still feel unpleasant, there's still that pit in the stomach or racing or whatever's happening. Some of it just softens a little bit when you accept that this is the world we live in, and this is the price we pay for caring.
Yeah, and it certainly is. It certainly feels like there is that trade-off. And it feels just such like a especially these times, and this year is really full of opportunities to feel like you're being punished for caring.
Yeah,
There's an awful lot to feel broken about.
yeah,
And uh I do think about this where it's like talking with some friends or talking with myself and feeling like, well, it just keeps on getting broken and more people pile it on, and you get a little disheartened. You lose a little hope from that.
yeah,
And when it comes to, I guess, like getting your, I don't know what the opposite of disheartened is. I guess the heartening back. You get the heart back.
yeah,
You get the hope back. Uh, when you reach back inward or deeper, I'm not sure, exactly where it is, but you find that well of love, or you find that stability. Uh, what is that conversation like for you, if you don't mind, of just kind of like releasing that seductive quality that anger or something like that can have, or that instinctual um, game that comes up when you feel dread, and you kind of start putting ill will elsewhere. What is that conversation like with you, where you kind of let go of that kind of impulse, but instead rely on something a little bit deeper? Like, because
yeah,
I feel like sometimes the seductive quality can be so overwhelming that it pulls
yeah,
you off your center.
yeah. I mean, one thing that has been profoundly helpful for me is a meditative practice that just invites in whatever is most prominent. And this is sort of the question you were asking earlier, how do you get close to those experiences? And actually, anytime you begin to meditate, you start that process of developing some capacity to be with what's difficult. You know, we all know this experience. You sit down to meditate, and then after some period of time, the anxiety that's just a low hum in the background of life that we don't notice because we're busy and distracted suddenly becomes a roar. That if you go on even a 1 day retreat, you start getting even deeper into like unprocessed grief, stress that's accumulated in the body that starts to release itself. And even in little ways, I think of it a little bit like going to the gym. Like we challenge ourselves when we meditate. Like feeling restless, can I just sit through this restlessness? Or I'm feeling some tender emotion, can I just open to that? Within like whatever our zone of capability or energy or tolerance is in that moment. But then we build more capacity. You know? And when you get closer to certain experiences, they sometimes lose a little bit of their ouch, I'd say. You know, and there's a process that has been talked about quite a lot in the mainstream mindfulness movement. Primarily, the popular way of talking about it is the acronym RAIN, which I'm sure you've heard. So you have a difficult experience, you recognize it. That's just mindfulness. I'm aware of this experience that's happening. I'm going to allow it, which is a kind of a antidote to ill will, really, or resistance or combating the experience, even if though we might not like it. So recognize, allow, and then the I is, I think of it, teasing the experience apart. This is something we also talk about in Vipassana practice, that we're like investigating the experience. So you see, like, many ways to do this, but the easiest is you can see in any experience there's a set of thoughts that are happening. So I'm feeling anxious, and there's something I'm anxious about. And the mind might be going in loops about, well, what if this happens, or what if this happens, or this is going to be so terrible, or I don't know how I'm going to get through this. The mind will invent all kinds of stories, so we can notice those, acknowledge that that's happening, but not engage with that sort of thought loop or thought patterning, and then come to the level of emotions. What am I feeling in the body? What is this experience of anxiety? Um, Familiar emotions, maybe there's grief in it or anger in it, but then coming to the most discrete level of pressure, tension, vibration, tingling, um, coolness, heat, these sort of tactile, visceral experiences that we're always having in the body. Um, Two things. One is that it's much easier to handle, like butterflies in the stomach, however you experience that, than it is the thoughts about the apocalypse, which are much more dysregulated. And secondly, there is something ineffable, mysterious, sometimes almost seems magical about the power of awareness and this mind body system ability to gather information primarily through our mindfulness and then process it in some ineffable way, that um, these energies will move through, these energies will settle. And in the process of that, we develop a kind of trust or confidence that, yeah, I know this experience, I know it's for this moment, I know it's going to pass, and it's maybe unpleasant, but I can tolerate that unpleasantness. I can be okay, even though it's not really okay. And that's a profound, you know, we reach that stage in our practice with any one thing. It's transformative.
I appreciate you offering that, because it really has helped me understand a little bit more about that relationship with those emotions as they come and go also. And with a mindfulness practice or a meditation practice, or just a reflective moment when any kind of emotional change is happening, there is this kind of step back that you take, like that rain um,
Yeah.
uh, program that you mentioned, where you recognize it, and then through the rest of the rain system, but also too, just even with meditation and all that. I think what helps develop that relationship, it seems like, to make it a friend, is like slowly that familiarity of like, oh, there
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah.
And I haven't really quite had that quite settle in my snow globe, if you will, in
Yeah.
my mind, until now. I mean, like that really, because friends you develop over time. I can't just be like, oh, anger, get over here, old buddy. Or new buddy, like, everyone's still learning everyone's names, everyone's still kind of understanding what's going on in this
Yeah.
orientation. But then if you really know how anger shows up and manifests and see all the telltale signs, it can, and you have the distance to know that that's happening before it takes over. There can be a little bit more of a gentleness and a familiarity that develops into that friendship. So thank you for kind of like, um, kind of reminding me that there is like a process when emotions come up, and
Yeah.
they do go out another door, and they are thoughts, and you can kind of settle into uh expressing, like, understanding them as thoughts, but also at the same time, you can deal with that butterfly that's buzzing around in your stomach, versus attaching yourself to complete calamity or complete disappointment or whatever it is that you're feeling. And I really admire your work, because you do a great deal with lawyers. You do a lot of like
Yeah.
mindfulness training for lawyers. You're a practicing corporate real estate lawyer yourself, and you have a lot of experience working with bar associations and various legal groups. And I'd imagine this year they are quite busy, and especially probably right now they are very busy.
Yeah.
All different types of lawyers, and I'd be curious what type of lawyers you find yourself working with, if they are just corporate real estate primarily, or if you kind of deal with a large swath. But what are some things that you've been helping with people that are working in high intensity environments, high turnover, in the sense of like what the projects that come in and out are, and how do you kind of approach them with these techniques?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've had the opportunity to provide teachings for a large, diverse swath of lawyers. The thing I'm actually most proud of is that I'm part of a program founded by my colleague Judy Cohen, who's also a meditation teacher and a lawyer, where we've been training lawyers to be mindfulness teachers. And I think we've probably trained 50, well, more than that, 80 people maybe we've trained. And so there's a beautiful multiplier effect of they get to go into their communities, and their communities are quite diverse, and offer sort of their take on these teachings. The biggest challenge with lawyers is you know, there's no quick fix here. And so, I tell people, people come to me with anxiety. It's probably the number one thing these days. Um, and they want to learn meditation to help them manage their anxiety more. And, you know, I kind of say, well, you have to commit at least 30 minutes a day to notice some improvement. If you can commit 45 minutes a day, you get a gold star. And this is a large bar for many people, notwithstanding that people can watch like a whole season of Netflix without blinking. There's much more resistance to taking on another thing and another thing to add to the list of all things that people are doing for themselves. So that's been the biggest challenge. The flip side of that is that lawyers as a group tend to be very motivated and focused and ambitious. So once you get buy-in from people, they'll do their homework. They'll you know um, they'll see the fruits of practice. I've never met anyone who didn't see some fruits of practice when they committed to a regular practice. But it's hard. It's that thing again. Like, where am I going to rest my attention? Where am I going to give my energy? You know, and for me, time spent in meditation has been the most profound thing that I've devoted my energy and attention to, why I'm trying to devote almost all my energy and attention to it.
And thank you for doing that. I mean, like to have about 80 trained people that can go into their communities and spread this kind of ability to uh, withstand some of these really high intensity environments and to be able to take care and probably be as a result a little bit more of a balanced person in their both in their professional lives and otherwise.
Yeah,
So thank you for doing that. Uh, and when it comes to the anxiety, I mean, just curious because there is this you know with doctors that are in the medical field that work in you know whether it's like surgery or they work in ERs and things like that, there is an emotional element that is being balanced while they do their work. And I'm not to say that they are all fully turned off when they're doing emotions, but there are certain things that they see in intense medical environments where the emotional load is paired or is maybe second to the priority of fulfilling the need that needs to be done in that moment.
yeah,
And I was wondering with law, because there are high intensity courtroom settings, or if
yeah,
they're if not mediation or otherwise that are tense, they can be quite tense. And there is training that goes on beforehand that kind of prepares you for that. Is the anxiety coming from a place of, oh, I hope I can do my job well enough, or I don't know if this case uh, is something that I can fully get behind kind of anxiety, or
yeah.
am I in the right, am I doing my life right now? Is this even what I should be doing in the first place? I was just curious what the nature of the type of anxiety that you kind of get and see when you work with lawyers.
Yeah, I think all of the things you mentioned are at play, but primarily what I see is that there's a structural issue in the practice of law, and that is that it takes a lot of time. Different environments. I worked in law firms where billable hours was the thing. So the economic incentives of the firm are to work their people as hard as they can. Every hour they get out of that person is goes directly to the bottom line. I have a friend, someone I trained who works as a public defender, and the stress is too many cases, very high stakes, people's freedom, people's sometimes there are even death penalty cases that where life is literally on the line, and you can never be prepared enough in some ways for these things. So if you're an overachiever, as most of these people are, you dedicate every waking hour to that cause, and so then there's no time, and then some people don't have a mechanism to uh, recover. I would say the same for physicians who work in a like maybe you have to turn off that bleeding heart while you're doing surgery, so you can actually do your surgery. But then, do you have a way to process, metabolize those experiences? And now maybe there are many ways to do that, but I found meditation to be an especially powerful way of doing that. Um, I actually just don't think that we as human animals were designed for the kind of professions that we've created, where people work 14, 16 hours a day nonstop. You end up being just in a state of constant adrenaline, which has all kinds of negative health impacts. So we're starting to see a little bit of the shift in the culture with lawyers, not much, but a little bit, at least, like the understanding that this is a problem. And, you know, there'll need to be more shifts to, create a community of wellness, but uh, just a lot of challenges to the way we set up our society. Like I have cousins who live in Germany, and I remember one time they were telling me that they have to take 6 weeks of vacation. I'm like, what do you mean have to? It's like, our boss insists that we take 6 weeks. And if we don't, basically it's an obligation. And so they take their 6 weeks every year, and actually even more. it's just like an environment that supports that. And I'm not aware that their living standard is any different than ours. We just have a mindset of, you know, capitalism on steroids, where it's created a lot of unhealthy work environments. Uh,
Yeah. Uh and and two, I'm like, when if you were to take 45 minutes out of your day when you're used to grinding all the time, that could be like, just sit and do quote unquote nothing, or like,
yeah,
how can I ever make room for that? How can I ever make space for that?
yeah,
Uh and this kind of goes in hand with what we were talking about earlier about the power of awareness, where awareness can be an incredible resource. It can bring you back to center. It can have that kind of find that inner stillness quality, or at least help you identify things that are things that can muddy the water, so to speak. But
yeah,
uh, in the way that society is now, possibly globally, but definitely within the American context, work is intense. Pushing yourself and also maintaining a workout regimen or whatever it is, and also to
yeah,
like the way that we have access to smartphones and computers and the various things, like the
yeah,
awareness is being it's there, it's just being
yeah,
focused or fed in a different way that can be lead to that adrenaline or dopamine
yeah,
draw that can be quite detrimental to everyone.
yeah,
um, and so it's so thank you for bringing up, this there is another way. There societies can operate another way for it all to be more healthy. And I know that also, in addition to your work with lawyers, you also uh, have done extensive work facilitating and mentoring other mindfulness teachers, or teachers that within the
yeah,
InsightLA or Spirit Rock um, meditation centers community. And when you working with somebody that's new to mindfulness is one language or one way of communicating with somebody. But how what is it like training or mentoring somebody who kind of knows the ropes? I mean, what are things that come up when they talk to you about things?
yeah. Um, I think there's something about, being in the seat of the teacher that um, highlights all our insecurities. And so there's that. There's, people have like nervousness speaking in public, or you um, I would say some form of imposter syndrome is kind of the most common thing. And I'm always actually kind of a little bit pleased to see like some skepticism about, what I know and what I have to offer, as opposed to the reverse, being overconfident, or over promising, or but I think my primary interest in training teachers is to help people find their own voice. Like, there's plenty of mindfulness teachers, but each mindfulness teacher that we add will have hopefully something unique in their sensibility, in their way of understanding the teachings, in their way of communicating about the teachings, maybe in their way of practicing. Um, so the more voices we have speaking this language, the more chances we are of somebody connecting with it, taking it on, being inspired in some way.
And do you find that there's a lot of resonance with I don't know if you currently or have had some mentors that have helped you along the way. I mean, are you still kind of in touch with some of the people that have trained you and have helped you through things that you can kind of every once in a while still rely on or reach out to?
Yeah, yeah, constantly. I've been very fortunate to have a number of very helpful mentors, and um, I get to teach with some of them now. So that's a really nice environment to be in, because it's just really fun, to like have come full circle in some way. And then that's a perfect opportunity for mentorship, because they getting to see me, at work with people.
And you work do you, I know for maybe the legal mindfulness training that you do, or for lawyer specific training that you do, you might be all over the country. For mindfulness, I know that you work out of the Los Angeles area, and then you come up to Northern California sometimes. Have you been drawn somewhere else in the country or the world that you've really enjoyed working with, or that you've had a particular um, experience with that you enjoyed?
Yeah, recently I got invited to teach a retreat in Indiana for a meditation group that's I think they're called Tri-State Dharma, and I think the three states are Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. And so I flew out to this retreat center in Indiana, and it's quite a different feeling than practicing in at Spirit Rock or InsightLA. It's like there's a sort of Midwestern sensibility that I really appreciated, and it was um, a little bit surprising, but also very heartwarming to see folks in the Midwest who are so inspired about meditation practice that they're bringing in people from across the country to offer retreats. We did a week-long retreat, a colleague of mine and I, and such sincerity of practice, you know. And although I was born in Indiana, we moved away when I was 4, and I'll confess, I don't think of that part of the country as being infused with, really good-hearted people who are trying to make a change in themselves and in the world. So that was really um, eye-opening. I was able to see, like a bias that I have against certain parts of the country that is just it's not true. Like wonderful people um,
Yeah, and and you can share something. You can bring something back, and that's fascinating that you also were born there before you moved away, and so now
yeah,
there's this uh you found like a you brought your home to it, and in a way, and your home like you're being things that you're familiar with, and you found it resonated, which is wonderful, and uh and two, like when it comes to the nature of the retreats and all that, and you're also your own development in all of this. I was wondering how you got how you got started with um, wanting to develop a mindfulness practice, and also a Vipassana practice, and to see uh, what that experience was like as you started to first approach it.
yeah. Yeah, I was fortunate. I was kind of exposed to meditation as a very young child. My father was a seeker of many things and found himself at a Zen center. And Indian sensibility is just you just take your kids wherever you're going. So I think I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and he took me to a meditation center, which is in retrospect probably completely inappropriate because I was sort of wreaking havoc at that age. But it that left a little bit of an imprint. I sort of, through my father, grew up with an understanding of what meditation is. Um, but it really wasn't until I graduated from law school and I went to go work for a firm that um, I was fortunate. I did well in law school. I got a very coveted job with a highly prestigious firm. It's supposed to be kind of like a pinnacle of early life achievement, and I was just miserable and really went through a kind of very intense quarter life crisis. And around that time, I was just looking for things, and I was living in Newport Beach, California, and I found in the library some cassette tapes that were Introduction to Mindfulness by Jack Kornfield, and I listened to those tapes and I loved them. They were amazing. I listened to the tapes. I don't think I ever returned them to the library. I listened to them until the tapes broke and I had to like splice them back together. They were pretty much on 24/7 for a period of time. And and then I went down to the Chopra Center, kind of before Deepak Chopra was that famous. So it was him in a room with like 30 people teaching, learning meditation. So I learned what they were up to. And then had a kind of a meditation practice, pretty, relatively consistent, um, that was profoundly supportive. And then in 2004, on a whim, actually, a friend of a friend was talking about this place called Spirit Rock and said, you should check it out. I hadn't really heard of a meditation retreat at that time. And so I just went on, was like, "Oh, that sounds cool, and week meditating, let me go do that." And I went there, and on those tapes that I was listening to, they were very low production quality. It's like someone just stuck a tape recorder in front of Jack. And so periodically throughout that tape, there was like the very loud creaking of a door. And when I got to Spirit Rock, I went into there's a trailer back then that they had as their welcome center, and I opened the door, and it was the same creak of that door. And I just had this sort of this because I hadn't even realized that this was a center founded by Jack, and he was kind of my first inroad to meditation. But I was somehow found myself there. I went on this retreat, and it was that feeling, of coming to a place and feeling completely at home. It just the practice I've been doing mostly prior to that was mantra based, and profoundly helpful. But then in the retreat I went to, I remember the theme was awakening from within the body, and they opened it up much more to like sensations in the body and emotions and thoughts, and felt like a bigger palette to work with in mindfulness than just the steadying of the mind that happens when you um, keep the mind steady on a mantra. So from then it was sort of no looking back. I started going on retreats over the years more and more regularly. By 2010, I was pretty much using all my vacation time to do retreats, and started a sitting group because I wanted people to practice with. I couldn't find a group here. And in the process of that, I was leading this group every week. Still amazed me that people kept showing up. Every week we have, between 5 and 15 people would show up to meditate. And so at some point I thought, well, maybe I should get some training, because sort of blind leading the blind. So I got some training. I trained in mindfulness-based stress reduction. And I thought this would be nice because it's a secular kind of uh, mindfulness that would be very helpful in legal fields. And that was sort of my main aspiration at that time. And then through just a series of fortunate things, being in the right place at the right time with the right people, I found myself now in a position to dedicate most of my life to this work.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a myth from I suppose being in a meditation center-ish Zen center at the age of 5, whether or not you were meditating,
Yeah.
but then to find yourself eventually where you are now, where you are leading and you are traveling for retreats and facilitating these things, and to have had those experiences where you're, uh, I can imagine it where you're listening to the Jack Kornfield tapes till they pop, basically, and then you're aware of that kind of creaking, and then you like have this like unbelievable experience of hearing that very creak and that kind of maybe jarring something in a positive way of just making it feel like, oh, I've been in this trailer all a lot because
Yeah, exactly.
it's
That's
been
exactly
playing.
what I was thinking. I've been here before.
Yeah. I mean, really fascinating story. And then, and I understand like that interest in wanting to have that more secular openness to being able to bring it to legal fields, to let it be applied and applicable to more people in that way, for just for comfortability's sake. And then when it comes to the more religious qualities of it, I mean, do you find yourself identifying as Buddhist and as somebody who practices within a religious capacity?
Yeah. Well, technically, I am clergy at Spirit Rock, so we actually have that designation. I definitely someone who follows the Buddhist path. I revere the teachings. I've spent a lot of time trying to penetrate and understand them. Um, so on that level, I would say I'm a Buddhist. The ist creates a little bit of complexity because anytime you organize things and the organization is done by people, then you know it gets complicated. So for all practical purposes, I'm a Buddhist, but I still sort of struggle with that word a little bit. And it's not the religiosity of the practice, because like I have a chanting practice, which most people would find sort of religious. I've done the practices of prostrations, which definitely feels very religious. It's just um, traces of skepticism about organized religion. And that being said, I'm on the guiding teachers council of Spirit Rock. I'm very involved in, leadership and governance, and I'm fully behind the mission. So it's just like something in me that's not quite lined up.
Yeah, I feel like do we need to put a label on it? It's just kind of like, can I just have my experiences and I get that feeling of the ist, the Buddhist quality
Yeah,
creating maybe I don't know if it's a tension, but just kind of like it adds an extra element that could be somewhat distracting. But it's
yeah,
interesting to learn that you have the chanting practice, the prostration practice that um, maybe someone that is in a secular or like a someone that is new to mindfulness might kind of have a reaction to, or might not feel
yeah,
fully uh comfortable with. And
yeah.
then
We've
I was
seen it. We've seen it. There's a group of two of my beloved teachers, Thanissaro and Kittisaro, um, have blended different streams of Buddhism. And I first was exposed to them at Spirit Rock at a retreat that they do every November. Historically have done every November, and you come and it's the whole show. Chanting, prostration, chanting several times a day, and it took a while for the community to kind of figure out this. Now they have a community, their own community also, of people that are kind of in this stream and follow that. But even at a place like Spirit Rock, that is a Buddhist meditation center, the introduction of those practices was not easy in some ways. I had an interesting conversation with Jack Cornfield once about this. That certainly when he was a monk in Thailand, they had chanting and other kinds of devotional practices. So what was it that when he and others came back to the United States and founded the Insight Meditation Society and Spirit Rock, why did they not include that? And so he gave me the best answer. He kind of shrugged his shoulders and he said, "We were kids. We didn't know what we were doing. We thought it might turn people off, so we just left it out." But then there was like an encouragement also from him and others of like, that for my generation of teachers could bring those things back if we want. And so I've done a little bit of that with some of my uh, colleagues to just like reinfuse the sense of like, for me, the power in chanting and devotional practices that they naturally engender a kind of respect and reverence, a kind of like movement of the heart that's very conducive to meditation practice.
I feel like there's I don't know if it's like a saying, but I at least understand this to be true, is like if you want to have some sort of therapy like experience, it's like take a singing lesson, or like
Yeah,
work with a vocal coach,
yeah,
because it's just going to kind of stir up some stuff that you just
yeah,
did not know you're going to have. And that's with chanting, I think it asks of that. It asks of a focused breathing. It asks of a bringing your voice from throughout your whole body too,
yeah.
and that just general focus too. So I can see it being very profound, and also allowing for that reverence that you're talking about to occur. And I know that you do work with Sacred Mountain Sangha,
Yeah,
and that it feels like it brings together different traditions within Buddhism, and then
yeah,
also it incorporates devotional Kuan Yin Dharma practices, and there's this kind of interfaith element to it too.
yeah.
What has your work been like with them, and just curious what that's been like.
Yeah, these are the teachers I was talking about before. I discovered them in like 2013, 14, and just really gravitated towards their expression of Dharma from their experience as monastics in the Thai forest tradition. Um, to the same tradition that Jack Hornfield was in, and there's something about monastics. I just have incredible respect for monastics and former monastics, because just to have dedicated your life fully to the path of practice, there's just something that emerges that's really hard to match, hard to describe the kind of depth of understanding. And so for SMS, I've taught retreats. I've been on that November retreat now for the last few years that we do at Spirit Rock. We've done some other retreats in other places. And classes, I just taught a class I called 10 Suttas Every Practitioner Ought to Know, where I'm drawing on the original teachings of the Buddha and the Pali Canon. We're reading them and discussing them. I did another course with them that was on the life of the Buddha, kind of using the legends and stories about his life as, teachings. And they SMS has a weekly group on Sunday mornings. It's kind of our version of church that I and a group of other people lead. So, and then I'm also involved in governance there on the board of directors.
Is some of that available on Zoom, or like if you're not there in person, or is this mostly
Yeah,
in person?
that Sunday group through Sacred Mountain Sangha is only on Zoom. They actually don't have a physical space, and this is something that I'm seeing more of. Like the groups I'm involved in at InsightLA, also they are hybrid. So I was there last Wednesday. We had about 25 people in the room. We had about 10 people on Zoom, and the tech is pretty good. Everybody can see everyone, everyone can hear everyone, and that has been a silver lining in the pandemic, that things really opened up. We have people from all over the country now coming to our events, which is really nice to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
wonderful, and it's great that there is that technologic benefit that people can kind of come in from all over. Well, this has been so wonderful to speak with you, and I wanted to offer some like a time for you to promote anything that you might be working on, or whether it's like an upcoming retreat, or I don't know if you have anything written that's coming out. I did want to draw people's attention to gullusingh.com, GULLUSINGH.com. And also you have a YouTube channel, which is the at Gullu dash meditation. And you have like a quite a few videos there that kind of lead some instruction, meditative instruction, but also have some talks there. But I wanted to give you some space to offer any upcoming things that you'd like to draw attention to.
Yeah, I think if people are interested in what I'm up to, they can go to my website. There's a schedule of events. There's also a newsletter that I have. I send out a couple times a month, just updates. The thing I'm most excited about right now is a kind of a specialized thing. It's called the Spirit Rock Dedicated Practitioner Program. And it's designed for more experienced students, people that have done at least 50 nights of retreats and have done 5 years of practice. But I was in the program about a decade ago, and then I was part of the teaching team the last go around. It's a 2-year program of intensive Dharma study, 5 in-person retreats at Spirit Rock, monthly groups, opportunity to be around good people, spiritual friendship, and that program really transformed my practice, and I think is largely the reason that I find myself now centered around spiritual practice. So if people are interested in that and they meet our prereqs, we're really trying to put together a good group of practitioners for that.
Wonderful. And then you find details for that on Spirit Rock's Meditation Center's website.
Yeah, it'll also be in my newsletter on my website.
Oh, perfect, perfect. Okay, great, great.
Yeah.
Um, and then also too, I had one last question, and it has to do with advice. So I was wondering if you have any advice that you'd want to offer to somebody who is walking the Buddhist path, and that you would have wanted to have heard as you were coming up through it.
Hmm. So many things I wish I heard a long time ago. Or maybe I did hear them before, but they didn't register. Um, I think probably the thing that's been the most profound for me is consistency of practice, and quality of practice is almost as important as quantity of practice. The Tibetans have a saying that drop by drop we fill up our bucket. So while I'm a you know firm believer in the incomparable power of a formal meditation practice, like I was saying, 30 minutes a day is a good place to start. Um, that's like learning to play scales. If you want to be a really proficient musician, you have to learn your scales. Uh, but then we don't want to listen to scales all the time. So taking the practice into the world is how it becomes music. And so that means more and more moments of attentiveness. It's not even complicated, just training yourself to remember to be attentive to whatever you're engaged in, to be attentive to this mind body system, and resisting the pull of the things that pull us out of presence.
Yeah. Oh, I love that that analogy, that metaphor of really like looking at practice like you are practicing your scales, like really like you're watching your breath, like you're taking care to look at where your fingers or your hands are moving on an instrument, and then to go and make music. I think that's just a wonderful thing. And then not give in to the hecklers, not give in to
Yeah,
the beer glass that fell on the ground or whatever it is, just like
exactly.
to allow for you to keep that rhythm going.
Yeah,
That's a wonderful way of looking at it. So thank you, and thank you, Gulu, for taking the time to
yeah,
speak with me today. This is
pleasure.
such a treat, and you offer something very very necessary. I mean, I'm not really involved with any legal groups or law firms myself, but I do know that that is a really intense environment to be in, especially these days. So thank you for offering so much to them and to others through your work with Spirit Rock and yourself. So thank you for everything.
Yeah, thank you. It was a real pleasure to talk to you.